What's up, Biggervis ones? Imagine getting raided and then turning that footage into music videos and then winning in courts. I mean, baby, the Afroman case isn't just funny. It actually has real implications for free speech, art, and content creation, and music. I had a completely different episode planned. I'm just going to keep it a buck for you this week. But this case has been the topic of conversation at the moment, and I wanted to discuss it before it reached a point where it was no longer timely. So let's do this week. I know I'm late to the party, but I cannot not comment on this whole case. Let's chat about Afroman. Let me give you the breakdown for anybody that doesn't know. Quickly, this past week, in case you missed it, I don't know how you would have, but if you did, Afroman, who we know as millennials, we love an Afroman. We love it. We saw him go to trial this past week where he lives in Adams County, Ohio. Just to put it on a map for you mentally. It's about 50 miles outside of Cincinnati-ish. That's where he lives. That's where he's been for a minute. Here's the situation. There was a raid at his house in 2022. Now, Afroman was not home at the time of this raid. His wife was. His children were. He was away. He was actually coming back from a show in Chicago, as I recall what he said on the stand. Correct me in the comments if that's not totally correct, but that is how I understand the background on that situation. So the raid was essentially brought on by local police at their discretion, which was based in a coerced testimony by an informant. Okay. So Afroman then created what the police force felt were defamatory videos and songs about them in response to the raid on Afroman's home. And local police went to go so far as to sue him for this, for the defamation in 2023. This has come to trial this past week. Just to catch you up. Okay. And the case has concluded. We'll get to the conclusion. But NPR explains it a little bit more concisely. The 7 law enforcement officials sued Afroman for defamation and invasion of privacy, saying his unauthorized use of their likeness hurt their reputations and made it harder to do their jobs. They sought the song, video, all the content's removal, and $3.9 million in damages. So the 3-day trial, and it only took 3 days, right around St. Patrick's Day. It focused on some pretty heavy topics like policing, free speech, and of course there was no shortage of viral sitcom-esque exchanges in the courtroom. So last Wednesday, after less than a day of deliberations, it's been a week since, the jury sided squarely with Afroman. Here's why. We're going to get into the why of this whole situation. Basically, if you don't know who Afroman is, if you're watching this podcast, you're listening to this podcast, you probably do. But if you don't, the man is well known as a rapper that bases a lot of what he does in satire. Yes, drugs are part of the content. Yeah, but it's a lot of exaggerated, just like any other hip hop situation, like most other hip hop situations. It's very similar. Afroman won this case purely because the public interest was there. There was a newsworthiness angle to this whole thing. The footage documented actual police action, so that was fact, right? Let's keep it a buck. It can be reasonably assumed that his audience does feel a type of way already about the police. So, yeah, there's interest just based on that. There's also the discussion around transformative use, like just from an artist perspective. He didn't just repost the footage. It became commentary and art, which is beautiful. It got us talking about fair use, parody, where the lines are when it comes to what you can or can't say in music. Now, as a refresher, the First Amendment, there's conversation about that and what it actually protects. It does protect artistic expression, parody, and criticism of authority. The key legal point being, In a situation like this anyway, where police officers are involved, you have to prove actual malice. And I'll get into what that means legally later, but because you couldn't prove actual malice in this case, this is why we have a win. So it begs the question, at what point does real life become fair game for art? If you ask Afroman, baby, ooh, it is all fair game. And we are here for the level of petty. We are here for the level of petty. We would expect it as Afroman fans, right? It's right up his alley. We're already thinking a type of way. We're already interested in keeping authority figures in check. It makes the utmost sense. But if you're not a fan, this is why this case matters for society. We're talking about police accountability and public transparency in this case. It is a reflection of society today where we are asking for these things. And the case makes it obvious. I think that is a good thing. I think a system of checks and balances is ultimately a good thing. I said what I said. The role of cameras in modern life is something of interest in this situation too. There's a time and a place for recording. That's been established, and I think we do need to maintain those boundaries. But in this instance, you're going to see that using his own footage, because just to make it really clear, the footage of the officers, while yes, there are moments of parody in these videos, the video specifically, there's other video footage that Afroman used that was taken in his own home with his own security camera. So it's his footage of the raid happening. There's cameras everywhere. And using his own footage, partially, if not totally and completely, I'm not a legal expert, we can get into that all day, but it had to help. It definitely saved him from a huge legal penalty. Because had there been any type of copyright infringement, well, that kind of throws a lot of his argument out right away. We're all kind of content now. Many facets of life are content right now. I mean, many facets of real life are content right now. So it's especially important to think about what we are using this power for and how we are constructing what we're creating. We've got to be mindful of how we're doing what we do as content creators or creatives, because there still is a right and a wrong way to do it. However, all facets of life can be turned into some form of artistic expression. This is what we're seeing with this case. I don't know of another instance where a musician, rapper, whatever word you want to use to define anybody creative, I don't know of another instance where someone has actually used footage of a police raid that happened in their own home. It was their own footage, and they turned that situation around and they said, oh, we're going to have some fun with this. We're going to parody this. It's going to be satire. It's going to be obvious exaggeration, all of which helps legally later. We'll get into that. But, it doesn't, it writes itself. It writes itself. If I'm Afroman, and I know my audience, and I know that this raid is complete and total bullshit, let's just call it what it is, why not? Why not turn a inconvenient, traumatic, damaging event into something not just funny, not just that will help you grow your audience, okay? Because a lot of us are interested in this, not just Afroman's built-in audience. I mean, it could help you recoup some of those expenses too. Why not? It's hard. It is hard out here. I don't blame this man. I do not blame this man for doing what he did. Here's another interesting point. If everything is filmed, though, who owns the story? And this gets dicey. This is where I'm going to call back to my journalism 101 back in college. If you haven't been through a journalism 101 course or anything like it, you might not know this. So let me break this down. In the US, anyway, we're talking just about the United States. Each state is going to have a different definition of what that ownership or looks like or how that content can be used legally. And you must be mindful of that. There are federal law considerations too, depending on the specifics surrounding those instances. It is always best to use your own footage, but pause before hit and publish. Here's why. In the United States, we have what are called 1 or 2 party recording laws. 1 state recording, 1 party recording, anything that sounds like that, this is what we're talking about right now. Most states in the United States are 1 party states, and what that means is you do have legal permission to record conversations that you are a participant in. However, you are not always covered legally to publish those recordings. That is a whole other animal. In a 2-party state, baby, don't even bother. Don't even bother recording unless both parties absolutely consent to it and you can document that consent somehow. Because it's hard. It's hard in those specific states. If I'm not mistaken, this is why New York and California, I'm pretty sure, are 2-party states, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But I'm pretty sure, because there is a lot of film, a lot of recording, a lot of media happening in those, especially in New York and California. I think that's why that exists. I think that's why those states lean those directions. Like, gotta be conversations about this stuff. So I'm not mad at these recording laws, but what it does remind you is that you got to be careful before you hit publish. It doesn't mean you can't record. It doesn't mean you can't hold on to the recording, but you do have to be careful and think about it before you hit publish. In Afroman's case, yes, it was his own footage, so nobody can hit him with copyright. That argument, out the window. It's his footage, his house, his property, period, end of discussion, his cameras. That's without question. You cannot do copyright infringement. However, the officers were still able to check him for defamation, use of their likeness, blah, 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 blah. We're going to get into the part 2 as to why that didn't work out in their favor. But they still had the ability to try him in court, and that's why. That's why. Because if something like that is called into question, well, yeah, you do have a legal right to examine that as well. And that's why this case got as far as going to trial. Here's why this whole thing matters for music in general. I want to take this angle too. Let's chat about this. Afroman, for those who don't know, I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this podcast, you know, Afroman has always blurred humor with commentary, with real life storytelling, all the above. Most rappers do. Afroman is not an exception. The case almost validates his entire artistic style. This is like, this was a gift for this man. Going back to all the things that he raps about before, going back 20, 25, 30 years, I mean, the themes are obvious. So we would expect Afroman to cover things the way that he did, to put out satirical parody videos, songs. We would expect it from this man. And he actually even used that notion as part of his legal defense. As part of his legal defense, you would reasonably expect, because I have obviously put out things with exaggeration and satire and parody before, you have no reasonable expectation that I wouldn't be serious again. I'm breaking that down in layman's terms. He didn't change for the system. The system had to catch up to him. I love that about Afroman. Like, the legal system kind of had to catch up to what he had already set in motion, to what he was already doing. In this instance, we had to do our research. You know, for those who didn't know him already, they had to do their research, and they were forced to look at, what is reasonable when he's involved and what isn't reasonable when he's involved. Here's a couple of my general takes on this. First off, good for him. Good for him. He's using his own footage taken in his home with his security cameras to make these videos. Again, no copyright issue there. I don't see a moral conundrum there either. You're entering his home. Period. period. Now, I don't know if there are signs that say, hey, recording, or I don't know that there's any type of warning. But look, if you're going onto somebody's property, it's their rules, kind of as a, I don't know, I think that's just a basic expectation that all of us have. And on top of that, another take I have, artists are allowed to create work surrounded in social commentary, and parody is part of that. Parody is part of that. Do we believe this officer ate all the pound cake, wanted to eat all the pound cake? I mean, okay, that's what makes it funny that this man is looking lovingly at a lemon pound cake, right? But, and there's footage of him looking at it longingly while he's in the middle of a raid. It's fun. Come on, it's funny. It's funny, and it's also not defamatory. If it's true, there's a video of this man looking longingly at lemon pound cake. Okay, Afroman just based a story around that. And then, of course, there's the other officers involved, which I would say, like, the lemon pound cake, and poking fun at that. And, that was pretty tame. That was pretty tame compared to what some of the other officers involved ended up having, parodied about them, presented about them in a satirical manner. That, depending on which one, I don't know that I would be happy either. So I guess I can't blame the officers for shooting their shot in court, but come on. And let's get deeper into that too. I mean, obviously these videos are funny because they are exaggerated there are exaggerated statements in them. They are obviously satire. And most reasonable people would see this. Most reasonable people would simply see these videos as funny and move on. Now, furthermore, some of what he is singing about, I don't know how many specifics I can get into here because some of it was kind of intense. Accusations, allegations, satirical ones, right? Some of it was verifiable by fact. Okay, said what I said. That's it. We'll leave it right there. So the argument then has to focus on his right to free speech, because that takes the defamatory portion out of the equation if it's true and it is provable. Well, yeah, some of it was provable. So you can't say that Afroman knowingly put out something that he was absolutely certain was or wasn't true. Maybe. I think what I'm more clearly, let me put it this way. Because some of that was rooted in truth, he doesn't know that he's putting out a lie. I mean, not really. And again, if you watch the videos, they are so ridiculous that they're clearly satire too. You gotta kind of look at it with that lens as well. You have to prove, what I learned from this is that you have to prove actual malice in cases like these, particularly ones where government officials, police officers, et cetera, when they are involved, it's almost harder because you have to prove actual malice in cases like those. And you couldn't in this one. So that's why Afroman won in an extremely watered down way. Just from the quick little bit of research that I've done, I'll just explain what actual malice is. Legally, it means that you have a responsibility to prove that the defendant made defamatory statements with knowledge that those statements were false, or with reckless disregard of whether they were false or not. Up for debate. It could not be proven without doubt that Afroman thought any of that was false and reckless. I mean, what's the definition of reckless? He said multiple times throughout the trial he could have been violent and he wasn't. I mean, how reckless were these statements? Was any of it accusing these officers of things that the rest of the community would go at. I don't know. I'm not part of the community. And I'm not a legal expert either. I'm not pretending to be. There's just a lot of gray area here. Again, because some of what Afroman was singing about in those videos is provable fact. And I would imagine, again, that does create a gray area legally. Side note. No, but this is the thing that I don't know that anybody is like talking about, checking in about. I don't know if anybody else is asking these questions, but I'm asking this question. I am still thrown by the fact that this escalated to a raid to begin with. Because the justification for it, like I said in the beginning, was based on a coerced, as I understand it, testimony from an informant. And I know that this isn't the first time that that's happened. So I start to, like, I sit there and go, well, how legally does this escalate to a raid if the whole warrant for it is based, again, on a coerced testimony from an informant? Is that really all it takes? There's got to be some sort of loophole. And if you are a legal expert, I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Hit me in the comments. Like, I don't understand. There's got to be something that allows for this to happen, but because it does happen, I just don't know how. And it kind of, my flabbers are gasted as to how. I don't understand. I don't understand how something so serious can be the result of something that doesn't have as many checks and balances as a defamatory statement would, or, actual malice, that whole process. It's just, I have questions, comments, and concerns about that whole process, but I can't speak to them because I am not a legal expert. I am not presenting as a legal expert. I'm just spitballing what I think about this case because it has captivated the nation. It is so deep that I'm hearing coworkers talk about it. Okay? Coworkers talk about it in Minnesota. We are talking about it in Minnesota. What? And then there's a part of me, like, as a millennial, that's happy that Afroman is back on our radar. Not that he left, but he's again at the forefront anyway of our minds. There's part of me that's happy about that. The nostalgic part of me is happy about that. It does fill me with joy to see us just being able to laugh along with this man again, because that's what I remember his music doing. It's a laugh. It's a laugh. It's fun. Of course, the question becomes, how far can or do you take it? And legally, there's a lot to consider when it comes to trying to answer that question. But to me, what's more important is your own moral compass, right? As a creative, sure, we can get creative, but how creative? Ethically, morally, come on, there is some responsibility there. We do have to consider those things too. So my opinion, my own moral compass, I don't think what this man did was a bad thing. Come on now. He experienced something pretty devastating. And these officers had satirical videos made about them. Okay? He's not going to their house, knocking down their door in front of their spouses and children, partners, all the above, their loved ones, right? He's not going and doing that. He's not getting violent with them. And then there's the whole, like, missing $400 of it all, like that. Whoo, that part, I do wish that they drilled down more into how this even escalated to a raid at all. But I understand that that's not what was being examined in this case. The case was being examined from an angle and questioning standpoint of free speech. Does he have it? Does he have it in a situation like this? And I mean, in conclusion, Afroman didn't just win a case. I think he kind of proved that real life is the content now. We're here for it, but like anything, there's pros and cons to that reality. Gone are the days of the aesthetic, but we're wanting topics and content that speaks to our hearts. Sometimes there's difficulty in being that vulnerable. We're wanting accountability. There's difficulty in being that vulnerable as well. But these are all reminders of these things. This is. I think we're getting a sneak peek. Not that all that wasn't present before, but I think it's been hammered home at the very least that those, when it comes to social media content creation, are still priority now. They're still priority now. When it comes to how we're getting our news, how we're getting our information, all of that is still priority now. We're looking for topics and content that speak to our hearts. We're wanting accountability. Everybody's, of course, going to have their own definitions of these things, which is another challenge in itself. But we want things to apparently at least appear those ways. So if you are a creative, you have to sit back and go, given that this is the situation, what are my boundaries? What are my ethics? And roll with it. There are some who will share anything and everything. And there are some that will share only specific things. There's, people I follow, all they want to do is put a cute outfit on and ta-da, it's posted, and that's great. I love seeing that too. Some want to talk about every single issue in life too. Do you want that? Do you not want that? Do you want to be doing that? Do you not want to be doing that? Well, that's up to you, the creator, and you, the consumer. Because I hear this argument all the time too. Why are we not holding content creators more accountable? We're expecting them to speak out. Why aren't they speaking out? Blah, 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 blah. Especially 2 months ago when ICE was doing the absolute most. Especially here in Minnesota. I hear that side. I hear that what it really sounds like is that we have a desire to bond with this person, and it's frustrating when that's not happening. And it's not happening because, by our definition, this person isn't getting that vulnerable, opening up their positioning on politics, whatever. I'm just throwing that out there. We want more, we're not getting it. We're frustrated by that. That's the core of what that argument is. And to that I say, you can't, just like in life, you can't make somebody do what they don't want to do. You can't. I wouldn't want to. I don't think anybody listening to this podcast would want to. I don't think that's our vibe. But you do also have a choice as a consumer. Arguably, perhaps a greater responsibility to really think about, okay, well, if I'm not getting what I need, if it's not providing for me what I want, totally and completely, well, then it can get to stepping and I can move on. I don't have to stay in that space if it's not meeting my expectations, if it's not doing for me what I needed to do. You can make that choice too. And that's what I would suggest. If you're not seeing something that you agree with, then okay, then don't sit in that. Problem solved. Things change. It's normal for people's positioning to change, for how they present themselves to change. Change is normal. As hard as it is to adapt to, and I'm not denying that it's hard to adapt to, it is inevitable. And I think we would do better to just sit back and take that in for a minute. Afroman's case reminded us of all of that and the importance of that. So I've rambled on about this, I think, for as long as I can. But it was wild. I wanted to check in and just talk about it. Again, I had other plans for an episode. And I think we are going to get to that one in a couple weeks. But this one we had to do right now. So thank you for joining me. Thank you for taking this ride with me. What do you think about this case? What do you think about this case? Were you on the side of the officers or on the side of Afroman? Did the jury do the right thing? In my view, yeah. By legal and personal moral definition, I would say that they did. What do you think? Let me know what you think about this case. It was a doozy, and if nothing else, it was fun to watch. Shout out to all of you who sent some nice messages about the Kenny Hickey interview earlier this week as well. I very, very, very much appreciate that. You've heard from me a little bit about how much that moment meant to me personally. And maybe someday we'll get deeper into that part of it. I think we are. And that's kind of partially what I had planned for this Wednesday episode, which, by the way, tell me what you think about this. I'm thinking about calling these solo moments that we've been doing on Wednesdays, Work On It Wednesday. I'm thinking about calling these Work On It Wednesdays because we have been going to church with these tips, with these tricks, with these environments that we're creating to just express it and get it out regardless. But we're also doing it with an attitude of let's improve. Let's recognize things for what they are, but let's improve on it. Let's work on it. So Work On It Wednesdays. Stay with me for more Work On It Wednesdays because we got more on the way. Thank you so much for joining me on this Work On It Wednesday. We will see you again next week. Hold on. We have a vigorously first. We have commentary. Commentary from my loving husband who just got out of the shower on the Afroman case because this is what we're talking about this week. Your thoughts, your general thoughts, sir.
Afroman for the people. Thank you.